A racist waiter refuses to serve a black woman, realizes far too late that she owns the restaurant. Marissa Lawson stood at the entrance of her restaurant, the warm glow of the lights spilling out onto the sidewalk. The sign above the door read, Southern Comfort, a name that resonated with the rich culinary heritage she had poured her heart into. It was a bustling Friday night, and the aroma of fried chicken, collard greens, and cornbread wafted through the air, mingling with the laughter and chatter of satisfied customers. Marissa felt a swell of pride as she watched her staff move gracefully between tables, serving dishes that represented not just food, but a legacy. As she stepped inside, the familiar sounds enveloped her. The clinking of glasses, the sizzling of pans in the kitchen, and the soft hum of jazz music created an atmosphere that felt like home. Marissa had built this place from the ground up, overcoming countless obstacles along the way. She had faced skepticism, prejudice, and the challenges of being a black woman in the restaurant industry. But she had persevered. Southern Comfort was not just a restaurant, it was a testament to her resilience. Tonight, however, Marissa had come to observe. She wanted to ensure that everything was running smoothly, especially with the new staff member, Jake Thompson, who had started just a week ago. Marissa had heard mixed reviews about Jake's attitude, and she was determined to see for herself how he interacted with customers. As she made her way through the dining area, Marissa noticed a table of regulars, a group of older white patrons who had been coming to her restaurant for years. They greeted her with warm smiles, and she exchanged pleasantries, feeling the familiar comfort of their presence. But as she continued to walk, she overheard Jake's voice rising above the din. "Can you believe that? They think they can just come in here and take up space," Jake said, his tone dripping with disdain. Marissa's heart sank as she realized he was referring to a black family seated at a nearby table, enjoying their meal. Marissa paused, her stomach twisting in knots. She had hoped that Jake would bring a fresh perspective to the team, but his words revealed a troubling mindset. She took a deep breath, reminding herself that she needed to address this behavior before it escalated. As she approached the bar, she caught Jake's eye. He was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips as he continued to make snide comments to a fellow waiter. Marissa felt a surge of anger, but knew she had to remain composed. She had built this restaurant on the principles of respect and inclusion, and she wouldn't let anyone undermine that. "Jake," Marissa called out, her voice steady but firm. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" He straightened up, the smirk fading as he approached her. "Sure, what's up?" Marissa gestured for him to step aside, away from the prying ears of the other staff and customers. "I overheard your comments about the family at table 6. That kind of attitude is unacceptable in my restaurant." Jake rolled his eyes, a dismissive gesture that made Marissa's blood boil. "Come on, Marissa, it's just a joke. They're not even from around here. They don't belong in a place like this." Marissa took a deep breath, trying to keep her emotions in check. This is exactly the kind of behavior that perpetuates discrimination. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, regardless of their background. You need to understand that. Jake scoffed, crossing his arms defiantly. "I'm just saying what everyone else is thinking. You can't expect me to serve people who don't fit in." Marissa felt a wave of frustration wash over her. This restaurant is built on the idea of Southern hospitality. If you can't embrace that, then maybe you don't belong here. The tension between them crackled in the air, and Marissa could see the anger simmering beneath Jake's surface. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, a commotion erupted from the dining area. A glass shattered, and the sound of raised voices cut through the atmosphere. Marissa's heart raced as she turned to see what was happening. A patron was standing up, pointing angrily at Jake, who had just served him. "You think you can treat me like this? I demand to speak to the manager." Marissa's instincts kicked in. She rushed toward the scene, her mind racing. This was not how she wanted her restaurant to be perceived. As she approached, she could see the tension in the air, the faces of the other diners reflecting shock and disbelief. "Sir, what seems to be the problem?" Marissa asked, her voice calm but authoritative. The patron turned to her, his face flushed with anger. "This waiter just insulted me and my wife. He thinks he can treat us like we're beneath him." Marissa glanced at Jake, who was now visibly sweating, his bravado crumbling. "I'm sorry to hear that. Can you tell me what happened?" The patron recounted the incident. detailing how Jake had made a snide remark about their choice of wine and had been dismissive when they asked for recommendations. Marissa felt her heart sink further. This was not just a personal affront. It was a reflection of the toxic environment Jake was creating. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention," Marissa said, her voice steady. "I will address this immediately." As she turned to Jake, she could see the panic in his eyes. "You need to understand that this behavior is unacceptable. I expect my staff to treat every customer with respect, regardless of who they are." Jake opened his mouth to protest, but Marissa cut him off. "You're on thin ice, Jake. If this continues, I will have no choice but to let you go." The patron crossed his arms, still fuming. "I want a refund for my meal and to speak to the owner about this." Marissa took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. "You're speaking to her? I'm Marissa Lawson, the owner of Southern Comfort. I apologize for your experience tonight. Please allow me to make it right." The patron's expression shifted slightly, surprise flickering across his face. "You're the owner?" "Yes, and I take full responsibility for the service in my restaurant. I will ensure that this is addressed, and I appreciate your feedback," Marissa replied, her voice firm. As the patron calmed down, Marissa felt a surge of determination. She would not let Jake's behavior tarnish the reputation she had worked so hard to build. She turned back to him, her expression resolute. "You need to step up and change your attitude, or you won't have a place here." Jake's face flushed with anger, but he nodded, the fight leaving him. "Fine, I'll do better." Marissa watched him walk away, her heart heavy with the weight of the confrontation. She knew that this was just the beginning. The restaurant industry was fraught with challenges, and she had to be vigilant in protecting the values she held dear. As the night wore on, Marissa continued to circulate through the dining area, checking on tables and ensuring that her customers were satisfied. She felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that she had to stand firm against prejudice and discrimination, not just for herself, but for everyone who walked through her doors. The evening ended on a high note, with patrons leaving satisfied and happy. But as Marissa locked up the restaurant, she couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. Jake's attitude was a symptom of a larger issue, and she would need to confront it head-on if she wanted to create a truly inclusive environment. As she stepped outside, the cool night air hit her face, and she took a moment to breathe. She had built this restaurant on the principles of love, respect, and community, and she would fight to protect it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but Marissa was ready to face them head-on. As Marissa Lawson locked up Southern Comfort, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lingered after her confrontation with Jake Thompson. It was late and the streets were quiet, but her mind was racing. She replayed the events of the night, the tension in the air, and the look of shock on the patron's face when she revealed her identity as the owner. Marissa had always prided herself on creating a welcoming environment, and she had no intention of letting one employee's prejudice tarnish her hard work. The next morning, she woke up early, determined to address the situation head-on. The sun streamed through her kitchen window as she brewed a pot of coffee, the rich aroma filling her home. She needed to think clearly, to strategize. Marissa knew that Jake's behavior was not just an isolated incident. It was indicative of a deeper issue that could affect her entire staff and the customers who frequented her restaurant. After her morning routine, she made her way to the restaurant, ready to face the challenges ahead. As she entered, the familiar sounds of the kitchen greeted her. The sizzle of bacon, the clatter of pots and pans. But the moment she stepped into the dining area, she spotted Jake leaning against the bar, chatting with another waiter. His demeanor was relaxed, as if the confrontation from the night before had never happened. Marissa's stomach tightened. She approached him, her expression serious. "Jake, can we talk?" He turned to her, a hint of annoyance flickering across his face. "What's up?" Marissa took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. "I need to discuss last night's incident. Your behavior was completely unacceptable, and it cannot happen again." Jake rolled his eyes, crossing his arms defensively. "Look, I said I'd do better. I didn't mean anything by it. It's just how I joke." "It's not funny, Jake. This isn't a joke. Your comments were disrespectful and hurtful, and they don't reflect the values of this restaurant," Marissa replied, her voice steady but firm. "I expect my staff to treat every customer with respect, regardless of their background." He scoffed, looking away. "You can't be serious. We all know some people just don't belong in nice places. Marissa felt a surge of anger but forced herself to remain calm. That attitude is precisely what I'm talking about. If you can't change your mindset, then perhaps this isn't the right place for you. Jake shot her a challenging look, and for a moment the air between them crackled with tension. But Marissa stood her ground, unwavering. She had built this restaurant from the ground up, and she wouldn't let anyone undermine her vision. "Fine," Jake said finally, the defiance in his voice fading. "I'll try to keep my mouth shut." It's not just about keeping your mouth shut, Jake. It's about understanding that we all deserve respect. This is a safe space for everyone, and I won't tolerate any form of discrimination, Marissa emphasized. Jake nodded, albeit begrudgingly, and walked away, leaving Marissa to contemplate the challenges ahead. She felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. Addressing Jake was only the first step. She needed to ensure that her staff understood the importance of inclusivity and respect. As the day progressed, Marissa gathered her team for a staff meeting. The restaurant was closed for lunch, and she wanted to take this opportunity to address the entire staff about the importance of maintaining a welcoming environment. She believed that open communication was key to fostering a positive workplace culture. "Thank you all for coming," Marissa began, looking around the room at her team. "I wanted to take a moment to discuss something important that happened last night. First, I want to reiterate that Southern Comfort is a place for everyone. We celebrate diversity and inclusivity here." Jake stood at the back, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. Marissa could feel the tension in the air as she continued. "We cannot allow any form of disrespect or prejudice to permeate our workplace. Every customer who walks through our doors deserves to be treated with dignity, and that starts with us as a team." A few of the waitstaff nodded in agreement, and Marissa felt a glimmer of hope. She had worked hard to cultivate a team that shared her values, and she wanted to ensure that they all understood the importance of their roles. "I want to create an open dialogue. If you ever witness behavior that contradicts our values, I encourage you to speak up. We have to hold each other accountable," Marissa said, her voice firm. "Together, we can create a positive environment for both our staff and our customers." Jake shifted uncomfortably at the back of the room, and Marissa caught his eye. She could see that he was struggling with her words, and she hoped that he would come to understand the impact of his actions. After the meeting, Marissa took a moment to speak with a few of her staff members individually. She wanted to gauge their feelings about the recent events and ensure that they felt comfortable coming to her with any concerns. Most of them expressed their support for her stance, but Marissa knew that Jake's attitude would be a lingering issue. As the day wore on, Marissa spent time in the kitchen, preparing for the dinner rush. She found solace in the rhythm of chopping vegetables, stirring sauces, and plating dishes. Cooking had always been her passion, and it was the heart of what made Southern Comfort special. But in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's behavior could undermine everything she had built. Later that evening, as the restaurant filled with guests, Marissa found herself on high alert. She kept a close eye on the dining area, watching for any signs of trouble. Jake was serving tables, and she could see him interacting with customers, his demeanor more subdued. As Marissa Lawson locked up the restaurant, her mind was racing with the events of the evening. The confrontation with Jake had left her feeling unsettled, but she knew that she couldn't let his behavior slide. Southern Comfort was her life's work, and she wouldn't allow anyone to undermine the inclusive values she had fought so hard to cultivate. Marissa took a deep breath, trying to calm her nerves. She knew that she would need to address the situation with Jake, but she wanted to do it in a way that would make a lasting impact. She couldn't afford to have a toxic employee in her restaurant, especially one who harbored such blatant prejudice. As she walked to her car, Marissa replayed the incident in her mind. The way Jake had spoken about the Black family, the dismissive attitude he had shown toward the patron who had complained, it all pointed to a deeper issue that needed to be addressed. Marissa was determined to get to the bottom of it. Once home, Marissa poured herself a glass of wine and settled into her favorite chair. She needed to think carefully about her next steps. She couldn't afford to make a hasty decision, but she also couldn't ignore the problem. Jake's behavior had the potential to undermine everything she had built. After some deliberation, Marissa decided that she needed to have a one-on-one conversation with Jake. She would give him a chance to explain himself, to understand the gravity of his actions, and to commit to changing his behavior. If he couldn't do that, then she would have no choice but to let him go. The following day, Marissa arrived at the restaurant early, determined to have the conversation with Jake before the dinner rush began. As she walked through the dining area, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. This place was her legacy, a reflection of her hard work and her commitment to creating a welcoming environment for all. When Jake arrived, Marissa greeted him with a stern expression. "Jake, I'd like to speak with you in my office if you have a moment." Jake's face paled, and Marissa could see the fear in his eyes. "Of course, Marissa. What's this about?" "Let's discuss it in private," Marissa replied, leading the way to her office. Once they were seated, she fixed Jake with a serious gaze. "I want to talk to you about your behavior last night." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his eyes darting around the room. "Look, I know I might have said some things that rubbed people the wrong way, but I was just joking around. You know how it is." Marissa shook her head, her expression unwavering. "No, Jake, I don't know how it is. This is my restaurant, and I won't tolerate that kind of behavior, especially not from my staff." Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Marissa held up a hand, silencing him. "Let me be clear. The way you spoke about that family and the way you treated that patron is unacceptable. It goes against everything this restaurant stands for." Jake's brow furrowed, and Marissa could see the defiance in his eyes. "Come on, Marissa. You can't expect me to just ignore the way things are. Those people don't belong here, and you know it." Marissa felt a surge of anger, but she forced herself to remain calm. "That's where you're wrong, Jake. Everyone belongs here, regardless of their background. This is a place of respect and inclusion, and if you can't embrace that, then you need to find another job." Jake scoffed, shaking his head. "You're being ridiculous. I'm just telling it like it is. If you can't handle the truth, then maybe you're the one who doesn't belong here." Marissa felt her heart racing, but she refused to back down. "The truth, Jake, is that you're a racist. You have no place in my restaurant, and if you think you can intimidate me, you're sorely mistaken." Jake's eyes widened, and Marissa could see the panic setting in. "What are you talking about? I'm not a racist. You're the one who's making a big deal out of nothing." Marissa leaned forward, her voice low and steady. "I have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, Jake. If you can't respect the people who come through those doors, then you're done here." Jake opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Marissa's phone began to ring. She glanced at the caller ID, her heart sinking. It was her father, Judge Carter, a respected figure in the community. "Excuse me, Jake, I need to take this," Marissa said, her voice tight. She stepped out of the office, answering the phone with a sense of dread. "Marissa, I've been hearing some concerning things about your restaurant," her father's voice boomed through the line. Marissa felt a knot forming in her stomach. "What do you mean, Dad?" "There's talk of a confrontation between you and one of your employees. Something about racism and discrimination," Judge Carter replied, his tone stern. Marissa took a deep breath, trying to gather her thoughts. "Dad, I can explain. There's a situation with one of my waiters, and I'm handling it." "Marissa, you know how important it is to maintain a good reputation in this community. You can't afford to have these kinds of problems," her father said, his voice laced with concern. Marissa felt a surge of frustration. "Dad, this isn't about reputation. It's about standing up for what's right. I won't tolerate discrimination in my restaurant." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and Marissa could almost feel her father's disapproval. "Marissa, I understand your passion, but you need to be careful. These are powerful people we're dealing with. You don't want to rock the boat too much." Marissa felt her resolve hardening. "Dad, this isn't about power or politics. It's about doing the right thing. I'm not going to back down, and I won't let anyone intimidate me." Another pause and then a deep sigh. "All right, Marissa, I trust you, but please be careful. You know how important your restaurant is to this community." Marissa nodded, even though her father couldn't see her. "I know, Dad, but I have to do what I believe is right. I won't compromise my values." After hanging up the phone, Marissa took a moment to collect herself. She knew that her father meant well, but she couldn't let his concerns sway her. This was her fight, and she was determined to see it through. Returning to her office, Marissa found Jake waiting anxiously. "Look, Marissa, I'm sorry for what happened. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Marissa held up a hand, silencing him. "Save it, Jake. I've made my position clear, and I won't back down. If you can't respect the values of this restaurant, then you're done here." Jake's face fell, and Marissa could see the fear in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that your employment here is terminated, effective immediately," Marissa replied, her voice steady. "I won't tolerate discrimination, and I won't let anyone undermine the inclusive environment I've worked so hard to create." As Jake left the office, Marissa felt a weight lifted from her shoulders. She knew that the battle was far from over, but she was ready to fight. This was her restaurant, her legacy, and she would defend it with everything she had. The following day dawned with the promise of a busy lunch service at Southern Comfort. Marissa Lawson arrived early, the sun filtering through the windows and casting a warm glow across the dining area. She took a moment to breathe in the familiar aromas wafting from the kitchen: fried chicken, black-eyed peas, and cornbread, her heart swelling with pride for what she had built. However, the events of the previous night weighed heavily on her mind. Terminating Jake Thompson had been the right decision, but the fallout from his behavior still lingered. Marissa knew that word would spread through the restaurant industry quickly, and she had to be prepared for the potential backlash. As the staff began to arrive, Marissa gathered them for a quick meeting. She felt a mixture of apprehension and determination as she stood in front of her team. This was her chance to reinforce the values that define Southern Comfort. "Good morning, everyone," Marissa began, her voice steady. "I appreciate you all coming in early today. Before we start service, I want to address something important." The staff quieted, their expressions attentive. Marissa glanced around the room, making eye contact with each person. "As many of you know, we had an incident yesterday involving one of our former employees. I want to make it clear that Southern Comfort is a place for everyone, regardless of their background. Discrimination of any kind will not be tolerated." A murmur of agreement rippled through the staff, and Marissa felt a surge of support. She continued, "I believe in creating an inclusive environment, and I need each of you to uphold that standard. If you see or hear anything that doesn't align with our values, please come to me immediately." One of the waitresses, a young woman named Lisa, raised her hand. "What if we see something happening with a customer, like if they're being rude or disrespectful?" Marissa nodded, appreciating Lisa's proactive approach. "If you witness any disrespectful behavior, whether it's from a customer or another employee, I expect you to address it. We have a responsibility to create a safe and welcoming space for everyone." As the meeting concluded, Marissa felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, determined to protect the integrity of her restaurant. The lunch rush began, and the dining area filled with the sounds of laughter and conversation. However, just as things started to settle, Marissa received an unexpected phone call. It was Sarah, a local journalist, who had covered her restaurant's opening. "Hey, Marissa, I heard about the incident with Jake. Can we meet for an interview? I'd love to hear your side of the story." Marissa hesitated, unsure if she wanted to go public with the details so soon. "Sarah, I appreciate your interest, but I'm still processing everything. I want to make sure I handle this correctly." "I understand," Sarah replied, her voice warm and encouraging, "but your perspective is important, especially in a time when so many businesses are grappling with issues of discrimination. This could be a chance to highlight the positive steps you're taking at Southern Comfort." Marissa considered Sarah's words. She realized that sharing her story might not only help her process the situation, but could also inspire others. "All right, let's set up a time to talk," Marissa said, her voice gaining confidence. After hanging up, Marissa felt a mix of apprehension and resolve. She was ready to reclaim her narrative and showcase the values that had guided her journey. As the lunch service continued, she watched her team interact with customers, feeling proud of the respectful atmosphere they were creating. Later that day, Marissa met Sarah at a nearby cafe. The ambiance was casual, with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. As they settled into a corner table, Sarah opened her notebook, ready to take notes. "So tell me what happened," she prompted, her tone encouraging. Marissa took a deep breath, recounting the events of the previous night, the derogatory comments, the confrontation, and ultimately, her decision to terminate Jake. "I felt it was necessary to stand up for my values and for my customers. No one should have to endure that kind of disrespect." Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It sounds like you made a tough decision, but a necessary one. How do you think this will impact your restaurant moving forward?" Marissa sighed, feeling the weight of the question. "I hope it sends a message that we stand for inclusivity and respect. But I also know that word travels fast. There may be people who try to undermine what I've built. But you're not backing down, Sarah said, a smile breaking across her face. That's what makes your story powerful. You're not just fighting for yourself. You're fighting for everyone who has faced discrimination. Marissa smiled back, feeling empowered. Exactly. I want Southern Comfort to be a place where everyone feels welcome, regardless of their background. That's what Southern hospitality means to me. As their conversation continued, Marissa felt a sense of relief washing over her. She was taking control of her narrative, and it felt liberating. When they finished the interview, Sarah promised to write a piece that highlighted Marissa's commitment to diversity and inclusion. Returning to the restaurant, Marissa felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was determined to create a positive environment that celebrated diversity. However, as she walked through the kitchen, she overheard two staff members whispering, "Did you hear about Jake?" One of them said, her voice low. "He's been telling people he got fired because Marissa's just trying to be a woke business owner." Marissa's heart sank. She knew that Jake would try to spin the narrative to make himself the victim, but she wouldn't let that deter her. She approached the staff members, her presence commanding their attention. "Is there something you'd like to share?" she asked, her tone firm. They exchanged nervous glances, and one of them, a young man named Kevin, spoke up. "We were just talking about the situation with Jake. Some people are saying you're overreacting." Marissa felt a surge of frustration. "I want you all to understand that this is not an overreaction. Discrimination has no place in this restaurant. If anyone feels uncomfortable or feels like they have to choose sides, I want you to come to me directly." The staff nodded, and Marissa could see the determination in their eyes. They were ready to stand behind her, ready to uphold the values that made Southern Comfort a special place. As the dinner service began, Marissa felt the atmosphere shift. The staff worked together seamlessly, and the dining area buzzed with energy. But just as she began to relax, the door swung open, and in walked a familiar face, Jake. Marissa's stomach dropped as she saw him stride in, a smug look on his face. The restaurant quieted as Jake approached the bar, and Marissa could feel the tension in the air. She knew that this wasn't going to end well. "What are you doing here, Jake?" Marissa asked, her voice steady but laced with irritation. "I just came to grab a drink," he replied, his tone casual. "But I heard you were talking about me, thought I'd check it out for myself." Marissa felt her heart race. "This is my restaurant, and you're not welcome here. I've already terminated your employment." Jake shrugged, a smirk creeping onto his face. "You think you can just get rid of me? And that's the end of it. I've got friends in this town, and they're not going to let you push me out that easily." Marissa felt a wave of anger wash over her, but she stood her ground. "You're wrong, Jake. This isn't about power or influence. It's about respect. If you think you can intimidate me or my staff, you're mistaken." The tension between them crackled, and Marissa could see the surprised faces of the patrons as they began to pick up on the confrontation. This was the moment she had been preparing for, and she couldn't afford to show weakness. "You'll regret this, Marissa," Jake said, taking a step closer, his voice low and threatening. "You think you're untouchable because you own this place. But you're not. I'll make sure everyone knows how you really are." Marissa held his gaze, refusing to back down. "I'm proud of who I am and what I've built. You won't tarnish my reputation or the values this restaurant stands for." With that, Jake turned on his heel and stormed out, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Marissa felt a mix of relief and adrenaline coursing through her. She had stood her ground, but she knew that this was only the beginning of a much larger battle. As the evening progressed, Marissa couldn't shake the feeling that Jake would retaliate. She gathered her staff once more, reinforcing the importance of unity and respect. Together, they would protect Southern Comfort and ensure that it remained a safe haven for everyone who walked through its doors. As the evening progressed at Southern Comfort, Marissa couldn't shake the tension that lingered in the air. The dinner rush was in full swing, and while the staff worked efficiently, she could sense an undercurrent of anxiety among them. They had witnessed the confrontation with Jake, and now, more than ever, they were aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Marissa moved through the dining area, checking on tables and ensuring that her customers were satisfied. But her mind was elsewhere, replaying Jake's words in her head. "You'll regret this." The threat hung ominously over her, and she couldn't help but wonder what he might do next. As she approached a table of regulars, an older gentleman raised his hand. "Marissa, we heard about what happened with that waiter. You did the right thing. We're all behind you." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," Marissa replied, grateful for the support. "It means a lot to know that my customers stand with me." As she continued to circulate, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a text from Sarah, the journalist. "Just wanted to confirm our interview tomorrow. I think your story is important." Marissa smiled slightly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She was ready to share her commitment to inclusivity in the values she held dear. However, her moment of peace was short-lived. Just as she returned to the kitchen to check on the staff, the door swung open again, and in walked a group of rowdy customers, led by none other than Jake. Marissa's heart sank as she recognized the smug look on his face. "Hey everyone, I brought some friends to show you how a real restaurant operates," Jake shouted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The group laughed, and the tension in the room escalated as patrons turned to see what was happening. "Jake, you need to leave. You're no longer welcome here," Marissa said, her voice steady despite the chaos in her mind. "Oh, come on, Marissa. I just wanted to introduce my buddies to the inclusive dining experience you've got going on," he replied, gesturing to his friends, who were already making themselves comfortable at the bar. Marissa felt her pulse quicken as she turned to her staff. "Someone call security," she instructed, her tone firm. "This isn't going to end well." Jake's friends laughed as they took their seats, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "What's the matter, Marissa? Afraid of a little competition?" one of them taunted. Marissa took a step closer, her expression unfaltering. "This is my restaurant, and I won't let anyone disrupt the atmosphere we've worked hard to create. If you don't leave voluntarily, I will have no choice but to call the authorities." The laughter faded from Jake's friends' faces as they realized that Marissa was serious. "You can't just kick us out," Jake said, his bravado wavering. "We're customers too." "Not anymore," Marissa replied, crossing her arms. "You're making a mockery of this establishment, and I won't tolerate it." Just then, Lisa, one of the waitresses, approached cautiously. "Marissa, is everything okay?" she asked, concern etched on her face. "Not yet, but I'm handling it," Marissa replied, keeping her gaze locked on Jake. "Please keep serving the other customers." Jake's friends exchanged glances, clearly unsure of how to proceed. "We're just having a little fun," one of them said, attempting to defuse the situation. "No harm done, right?" Marissa shook her head. "You're not here to enjoy a meal. You're here to cause trouble. You need to leave." As the tension thickened, Marissa felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She had built this restaurant as a sanctuary, and she wouldn't allow anyone to tarnish that vision. Just then, the restaurant manager, Greg, stepped in, having overheard the commotion. "Jake, I think it's best you and your friends leave," Greg said, his tone authoritative. "This is not the place for your antics." Jake's face flushed with anger, and he shot Marissa a glare that could pierce through steel. "You're going to regret this, Marissa. I'll make sure everyone knows how you really treat your employees." Marissa took a deep breath, bolstering her resolve. "I treat my employees with respect, Jake. You're the one who needs to learn that lesson." With a huff, Jake turned on his heel and stormed out, his friends trailing behind him, muttering under their breaths. The tension in the restaurant began to dissipate, and Marissa felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Is everything all right?" a customer at the bar asked, concern in his voice. Marissa forced a smile, her heart still pounding. "Yes, thank you for your patience. We're committed to ensuring a positive experience for all our guests." As the night continued, Marissa felt a renewed sense of determination. She had stood her ground against Jake, and she wouldn't let fear dictate her actions. The staff rallied behind her, and together they worked to create a welcoming atmosphere. After the dinner rush, Marissa gathered her team again. "I want to thank you all for your support tonight. We faced a difficult situation, but I'm proud of how we handled it. We must continue to stand firm in our commitment to inclusivity." The staff nodded and Lisa spoke up again. "Marissa, we really appreciate your leadership. It's inspiring to see you stand up for what's right." Marissa smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Thank you, Lisa. This restaurant means everything to me, and I want it to reflect the values we all believe in." As the conversation continued, Marissa felt a sense of solidarity among her team. They were united in their mission to create a space where everyone felt welcome. But as the closing hour approached, Marissa couldn't shake the feeling that Jake's threats would not simply fade away. Later that night, after the last customers had left and the staff began to clean up, Marissa sat down at the bar with a glass of water. She needed a moment to collect her thoughts. Just then, her phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from Sarah. "I heard about your incident with Jake. I think it's important to address this publicly. Let's discuss how to frame your story." Marissa felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. Sharing her experiences could help shed light on the issues of discrimination in the restaurant industry, but it also meant exposing herself to potential backlash from those who might support Jake. As she typed a response, her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from a number she didn't recognize. "You think you can get rid of me that easily? You'll regret crossing me." Marissa's heart raced. She knew this was from Jake. The threat felt tangible, and she had to act fast. She decided to inform the police about the message and the earlier confrontation. She wouldn't allow fear to dictate her actions. She would take control of the narrative. With a newfound sense of urgency, Marissa grabbed her phone and dialed the local police department. As she waited for someone to answer, she felt a surge of determination. No one would intimidate her or diminish her hard work. Southern Comfort was her home, and she would protect it at all costs. The next morning, Marissa woke up with a sense of urgency. The message from Jake gnawed at her, its implications swirling in her mind like a storm cloud. She knew she had to take action, not only to protect herself, but also to safeguard her restaurant and her staff. Marissa had built Southern Comfort on the pillars of respect and inclusion, and she wouldn't let anyone undermine that. After a quick breakfast, Marissa headed to the police station. She felt a mixture of anxiety and determination as she approached the building, her heart pounding in her chest. As she walked through the doors, she was greeted by the receptionist, who directed her to a desk where an officer was waiting. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you today?" the officer asked, his tone professional but friendly. Marissa took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I'd like to report a threat I received from a former employee. He was recently fired for discriminatory behavior, and I think he might retaliate." The officer nodded, motioning for her to sit down. "Please, tell me what happened." As Marissa recounted the events, the confrontation with Jake, the message he had sent her, she felt a sense of empowerment. She was no longer just a victim. She was taking control of the narrative. The officer listened intently, taking notes as she spoke. "Based on what you've described, we can file a report and keep an eye on the situation," the officer said. "If he approaches you or causes any disturbances, be sure to contact us immediately." Marissa nodded, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "Thank you. I appreciate your help." After leaving the police station, Marissa returned to Southern Comfort, her mind racing with thoughts of how to fortify her restaurant against any potential backlash. She called a staff meeting to discuss the situation and reinforce their commitment to creating a safe environment. As her team gathered in the kitchen, Marissa looked around at the faces of her staff, knowing how much they relied on each other. "Thank you all for coming in early today. I wanted to update you on the situation with Jake. I filed a report with the police after receiving a threatening message from him." Gasps echoed through the room. Lisa, the waitress who had been vocal during the last meeting, spoke up. "Are you serious? He's really threatening you?" "Yes," Marissa replied, her tone steady. "But I want to assure you that I'm taking this seriously. We won't let his behavior define us or our restaurant. We're committed to maintaining the values of respect and inclusion that Southern Comfort stands for." One of the cooks, a young man named Andre, raised his hand. "What if he tries to come back here? Should we be worried?" Marissa shook her head. "I don't want anyone to feel scared, but we need to be vigilant. If Jake shows up, I want everyone to stand together. Call the police if necessary." The staff nodded, their expressions resolute. They were ready to support Marissa, and she felt a surge of gratitude for their solidarity. Together, they could weather any storm. As the lunch rush started, the restaurant filled with the sounds of chatter and laughter. Marissa moved through the dining area, checking on tables and ensuring everything was running smoothly. The atmosphere felt electric, and for a moment she allowed herself to relax, feeling the love and support of her community. Then, just as she was beginning to feel at ease, the door swung open. Marissa's heart sank as she recognized the figure standing in the doorway. Jake. "Hey, everyone. I just wanted to come by and say how much I miss working here," he called out, a fake smile plastered on his face. The room fell silent, and Marissa felt her pulse quicken. She glanced at her staff, who exchanged worried looks. "Jake, you need to leave. You're not welcome here," Marissa said, her voice steady but firm. "Come on, Marissa. I'm just here to have a drink and catch up with old friends," he replied, taking a few steps inside. "No harm in that, right?" Marissa stepped forward, blocking his path. "You're making a scene and I won't allow it. If you don't leave immediately, I'll call the police." Jake's expression shifted, and the bravado faded from his face. "What are you going to do? You think you can just push me around because you own this place?" "Jake, this isn't about power. This is about respect," Marissa said, her voice unwavering. "You've shown none, and I won't tolerate it any longer." Jake took a step back, his eyes narrowing. "You'll regret this, Marissa. You can't keep me out forever. I've got friends who'll back me up." "Friends who support your behavior? That's not the kind of support you need," Marissa replied, her determination hardening. "I've already reported your threats to the police. If you think you can intimidate me or my staff, you're mistaken." As the tension in the room escalated, one of the patrons, a middle-aged woman who had been dining with her family, stood up. "I think it's time for you to leave, young man. This is a place of respect, and you clearly don't belong here." Jake opened his mouth to protest, but the woman's words resonated with the other diners. More customers began to voice their agreement, their support for Marissa evident. "Get out," someone shouted, and the chorus of voices grew louder. Realizing he was losing control of the situation, Jake's bravado crumbled. "Fine, I'll go, but this isn't over," he shouted, glaring at Marissa as he turned to leave. As the door slammed behind him, a wave of relief washed over the restaurant. Marissa could feel the support of her patrons and staff, and it empowered her. She took a moment to collect herself, then turned to her team, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you all for standing with me," Marissa said, her voice filled with emotion. "We will not let fear dictate our actions. Southern Comfort is a place for everyone, and together we will protect it." The staff erupted in cheers and applause, their spirits lifted. Marissa felt a renewed sense of purpose. She would continue to fight for what was right, not just for herself, but for everyone who walked through her doors. In the days that followed, the community rallied around Southern Comfort. News of the incident spread, and articles highlighting Marissa's commitment to inclusivity began to appear in local publications. Support poured in from regular customers and new patrons alike, all eager to show their solidarity. Marissa felt buoyed by the positive response. She organized a community event at the restaurant, a diversity night where people could come together to celebrate their differences and share their stories. The event was a resounding success, filled with laughter, music, and delicious food, creating a sense of unity that warmed Marissa's heart. As she stood in the bustling restaurant, surrounded by friends and supporters, Marissa realized that she had not only protected her restaurant, but had also strengthened its foundation. Southern Comfort had become a beacon of hope, a place where everyone was welcome, no matter their background. In that moment, Marissa knew she had turned a corner. The fight against discrimination was ongoing, but she was more than ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With her community by her side, she was confident that they could create a better future together. The following weeks at Southern Comfort unfolded like a vibrant tapestry, each day woven with threads of community support and unwavering resilience. Marissa Lawson had transformed the restaurant into a hub for inclusivity, and the spirit of togetherness permeated the air. The Diversity Night had become a monthly event, attracting patrons from all walks of life. Laughter and conversation filled the space, and Marissa reveled in the warmth of her community. However, the shadow of Jake Thompson still loomed over her. Although he hadn't returned since that fateful day, Marissa knew he was out there, likely plotting his next move. Each time the door opened, her heart raced, but she had resolved not to let fear dictate her life or her business. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue through the restaurant windows, Marissa was busy preparing for another diversity night. She set the tables with care, arranging colorful centerpieces that reflected the cultural richness of the dishes she served. The sound of clinking glasses and cheerful chatter created an atmosphere of anticipation. Just as the event was about to kick off, Marissa received a phone call from Sarah, the journalist who had interviewed her weeks earlier. "Marissa, I have some news," Sarah said, her voice urgent. I think it's important you know that Jake has been spreading rumors about you and Southern Comfort. He's been telling people that you're running a woke establishment and that you're only interested in promoting a specific agenda. Marissa's stomach twisted at the news. What? That's absurd. I'm just trying to create a welcoming space for everyone. I know, and I'm planning to write an article to counter his claims. I want to highlight your commitment to community and respect, Sarah replied, her tone reassuring. But I think it's important you address this directly. Marissa took a deep breath, her resolve strengthening. You're right, I need to confront this head-on. I can't let Jake distort the truth about what I've built. As the clock struck 7, guests began to arrive for diversity night. Marissa welcomed them with open arms, her heart swelling with pride as she watched the diverse crowd gather. Families, friends, and neighbors filled the tables, eager to share stories and celebrate their differences. Midway through the event, Marissa took the stage to address the crowd. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, her voice ringing with warmth. Southern Comfort is not just a restaurant, it's a community. It's a place where we celebrate our differences and learn from one another. She paused, looking out at the smiling faces before her. Recently, I've heard some troubling rumors. Some have tried to undermine the spirit of what we're doing here, claiming that our commitment to inclusivity is somehow divisive. But I want to assure you that everyone is welcome in this space, regardless of their background. The crowd erupted in applause, and Marissa felt encouraged. We must stand together against discrimination and hate. We need to lift each other up and celebrate the rich tapestry of our community. Just as Marissa finished her speech, the doors swung open, and in walked Jake, flanked by a couple of his friends. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Murmurs filled the room as patrons turned to see who had entered. Jake's eyes scanned the crowd, and when they locked onto Marissa, a smirk spread across his face. Looks like the woke crowd is out in full force, Jake called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Laughter erupted from his friends, but the crowd quickly hushed, tension hanging in the air. Marissa felt her heart race. This was the moment she had feared. The crowd looked to her for guidance, and she took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. Jake, she said, her voice firm yet calm, this is not the time or place for your antics. You need to leave. He stepped forward, his bravado faltering slightly as he faced the room filled with supporters of Marissa. Oh, come on, I'm just here to have a good time. What's wrong with that? Your idea of a good time involves disrupting a space meant for celebration and unity, Marissa replied, her voice unwavering. You've made your opinions clear, and they have no place here. I won't allow you to poison the atmosphere we've worked so hard to create. Jake's expression darkened, and he glanced around, realizing that the crowd was not on his side. You think you can just push me out of your little club? You're going to regret this, Marissa. People are talking, and they're not happy. Marissa saw the challenge in his eyes, but she refused to back down. If you're referring to your friends who support your toxic behavior, they can stay or go as they please. But I will not let you intimidate me or my patrons. The tension in the room crackled as patrons began to murmur in agreement. You're out of line, Jake, one customer said, standing up. This restaurant is for everyone, and we won't let you ruin it. As voices rose in support of Marissa, Jake's demeanor shifted. He realized he was losing control of the situation. Fine, I'll leave, but don't think this is over, he shouted, retreating toward the exit. With every step he took away from the crowd, Marissa felt lighter. The support of her community enveloped her like a warm embrace, and she knew that together they could overcome any challenge. Once Jake was gone, the crowd erupted in applause, chanting Marissa's name. Tears of gratitude welled up in her eyes as she took in the scene. This was more than just a restaurant. It was a family united against discrimination. Thank you, everyone, Marissa said, her voice quavering with emotion. Your support means everything to me. Together, we'll continue to create a space where everyone feels welcome and respected. The rest of the night unfolded beautifully, filled with laughter, music, and celebration. Patrons shared stories, danced, and enjoyed the delicious food that had become synonymous with Southern Comfort. For Marissa, the night was a testament to the strength of community and the power of standing up for what was right. In the days that followed, Sarah's article was published, highlighting Marissa's commitment to inclusivity and her determination to combat discrimination. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Customers flocked to the restaurant, eager to support the cause. Southern Comfort thrived, becoming a symbol of resilience and unity in the face of adversity. As Marissa looked around her bustling restaurant, she felt an overwhelming sense of pride. She had stood her ground against prejudice and had emerged stronger than ever. Southern Comfort was more than just a restaurant. It was a beacon of hope for those seeking a place of belonging. With her staff and community by her side, Marissa knew she could face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would continue to build a future that embraced diversity and celebrated the richness of their shared humanity. And as the night came to a close, Marissa felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had fought for her vision, and in doing so, she had created a sanctuary where everyone was welcome. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.